Hi, I've gone back to 2013 again to bring you two videos on how to make halving joints or half-lap joints.
Hi, I've just cut this piece of wood in half so I can show you how to make a half-lap joint really quickly without any measuring. A half-lap joint is where we remove half the material from the thickness of one piece, half from the other, put those cut surfaces together, and we end up with a flush joint. What's so difficult about that? Well, you've got to measure halfway. What if you don't have a ruler? All you need to cut a half-lap joint using this technique is a table saw and either a mitre fence or, as I've got here, a cross-cut sled. First thing we have to do is find the middle of our component. And remember, we don't have a ruler or a tape, so how are we going to do that? I'm going to take a pencil and just roughly mark where I think centre might be, using my finger as a fence. Do the same from the other side. Well, I wasn't exactly spot on. Let's go in between those lines, and that's a good approximation of where the centre is. That's not quite accurate enough for our joint though, so we're going to set the height of our saw to just below that pencil line. With the component face down on the table or on the crosscut sled, move it up close to the teeth. Now you need to rotate the blade until you find the highest point in its travel. Now we raise the blade until we're just below where we gauged as being the middle. Now we're going to take two cuts, one with this face down on the table and one with the opposite face down on the table. Now you can see we've left behind a little piece of wood right in the middle of a component. We know it's right in the middle because we've cut from both sides. Find the highest point your teeth will go on the blade and raise your saw. Set it to the middle of the waste material that you left behind, and that's good enough for rough work. You can now go ahead with stage 2, which is removal of all the waste for the half lap. But why not continue and do it accurately the way I do? Gradually increase the height of your blade and take passes on both sides until your waste material is as thin as a sheet of tissue paper. That'll be roughly between 1 and 2/1000ths of an inch. And if you prepare your joint like that, a single swipe with a smoothing plane will have all your edges flushed up. Even if you only intend to sand your joint, that 1/1000th of an inch will easily disappear with a few strokes of paper. So I raise my blade a little bit and cut again. And very quickly I've got to exactly the right width I'm looking for. That's incredibly thin, and if you look carefully you may be able to see that in a couple of places the tip of the blade has just broken through right in the corner. So that's as close to the middle as you're going to get. Now to finish preparing the joint we need to mark up. So I want to remove this material here and this material here. And I want my cut to extend at least the width of this material. So I'll leave a little bit extra to clean off with the plane afterwards on here. Make a mark, and the same on this one. Leave a little bit of material extending over the end and make a mark. And now I can go ahead and remove all this material just by running across the blade on the table saw. Remember, don't change the height. And the result is a lovely joint. Nice tight joint lines and nice and flush. So I'll glue that up. After a few strokes of the plane, there we have a lovely half lap joint. Super tight, lovely and flush, and without measuring anything. And then we'll mark the width of this material, and I'm going to do that by putting it on top against the square, holding it still and marking a second knife line. Ordinarily you would measure out and use the square. Now I need to transfer those marking lines halfway down the depth of this piece. And final one there. And then on our other piece of wood, we want this to end up flush. I'm going to leave it just slightly longer so that we can flush that up with the plane. I'm going to take my square on here, use the thickness of this board to set the position of my square, just so that we're slightly long. Lock the square in position, mark a knife line, and then mark that halfway down each side. And next is to mark out the halfway point through the material, and we'll use a marking gauge to do that. So now I'll mark that line through halfway down that section. Flip it over, staying on the face side, mark halfway again, let's mark the middle of this section between our knife lines. To make sawing a little bit easier, I'm going to pare out a little bit of wood against our knife line and just saw down to the halfway point. And the second piece. I'm going to remove the waste material by taking slanting cuts upwards from the edge towards the middle. And before you get to the knife line, switch over and work from the other side. As you approach the knife line, switch over to pairing cuts and just take a thin piece at a time. Try not to work right across to prevent you tearing out any material on the other side. And I've come in on the knife line now, and I'm referencing the flat of my chisel against the vice cheek, which is slightly lower than the knife line, so I know that I'm going to end up with a pyramid, as it were, in the middle, which I can then flatten down across the width of the joint. And I'm slightly short on my sawing there. And then the same procedure as with the other one, just pairing right down to the knife line. Now I've clamped my work down on the bench. I'm going to cut the shoulders here at 90 degrees using a sharp chisel, working from my knife line . And that's a lovely tight fit. I just want to clean the shoulder up on this piece as well. I'll glue that, and then we'll just flush off this side with a plane. Maybe give one pass over there.
Look after yourselves and don't forget to subscribe to see videos every day during the COVID-19 problems.